Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a long and pretty uncomfortable look at a crucial industry.
Construction management.
Exactly. An industry where competence and, well, legal authority often seem completely divorced from one another.
They really do.
And before we get into the details, we have to start with this foundational fact that our sources kept highlighting. It's something that should make anyone who's ever commissioned a project, a new home, a high-rise, anything, just sit up a little straighter.
It's a bit of a shocker.
It is. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You can be a licensed general contractor, a GC in the United States, and have absolutely zero verifiable experience in framing.
Or finish work, concrete, electrical, plumbing.
None of it. And yet, despite that massive knowledge gap, you hold full legal, financial, and regulatory authority over a complex, multi-million-dollar project.
And that core disconnect is exactly what we're dissecting today. We're not really here to talk about individuals.
No, not at all.
It's about the structural system that grants this immense authority without demanding demonstrable field competence. If you've ever wondered why construction projects seem to perpetually run late,
Or budgets just explode.
or mistakes just cascade into bigger mistakes,
Yeah.
this systemic flaw might just be the single biggest reason the whole industry can feel, broken.
It is a systemic critique, absolutely. And the central debate we found in the source material is fascinating. It really pits the old guard against this modern reality.
Right.
So on one side, you've got the defense of the modern GC, which argues you don't need to be a tradesperson to manage trades.
It's the whole separating execution from management idea.
Exactly. And then the counter-argument, the critique, is just as powerful, and it's rooted in reality. If you don't actually understand the work, you can't possibly control the project's schedule, its budget, or its safety.
And if you can't do that, you shouldn't have legal control. So our mission here is to see which of those two models really survives a reality check on a live job site.
Okay, let's start by giving the defense its due. Let's look at the modern general contractor. Why does this system even exist? The argument is that the GC is fundamentally a manager, a conductor.
Right. They're not supposed to be an expert in everything from, say, pouring footings to hanging trim. They're supposed to be experts in process flow.
Oh, okay. So what are those key functions then?
Well, as laid out by the defense of this model, they're almost purely administrative and logistical.
So scheduling the work.
Scheduling work, pulling the necessary permits, coordinating the dozens of separate trades, HVAC, drywall, all of them.
And managing all the vital paperwork.
And, maybe most importantly, holding the bag for the project liability, the financial risk.
And if you look at it abstractly, the logic kind of holds up. We're always told that every major industry separates execution from management.
The CEO analogy.
Right. A CEO doesn't have to be able to code the latest software update. They manage the team, the resources. So in this view, the GC is just the CEO of the job site.
They manage the flow and the liability, and they trust that the subcontractors, who are licensed in their own specific trades, will handle the technical side flawlessly.
That analogy, the CEO of the job site, it's powerful.
Yeah.
And it's probably why the system persists.
But this is exactly where the source material shows that logic just completely collapsing.
How so?
Because construction is fundamentally different from a factory floor. Your inputs aren't predictable. Your outputs aren't standardized. Construction is sequencing, and sequencing requires this anticipatory judgment that can only come from deep knowledge.
I have to say, I was genuinely surprised by that distinction. I get why it breaks down, but how does the nature of building itself make that management-only model fail so profoundly?
It's because in construction, every single activity is a dependent variable. You can't install insulation until the electrical and plumbing rough-ins are inspected and passed.
And you can't hang the drywall until the insulation is in.
Exactly. And you can't get the installation done until the inspector shows up, and you have zero control over their schedule. So if the framer is 2 days late, that tiny delay, it doesn't just push the drywaller back 2 days. It might push the insulation inspection back a full week.
Which then cascades into a 3-week delay because the plumber couldn't get back on site until the next month.
You got it. So management becomes complete guesswork. If the GC has never been on the tools or never watched that cascade happen in real time,
if they can't fluently read a full, complex plan set and understand the structural load path, not just the pretty details,
then they're scheduling dependencies without understanding the actual, realistic production timelines of the trades. Their schedule is basically built on hope,
Or worse, on the optimistic projections of the subcontractors.
whose financial incentive is often just to tell the GC whatever they want to hear. If you don't get the physical constraints, like how long concrete must cure or the real difficulty of flashing a complex roof penetration, you're just managing a ghost schedule.
And this leads to a really uncomfortable truth that the research highlights about what many modern GCs rely on instead of that deep knowledge. If they can't use experience, what are they using to fill that huge competency gap?
Administrative tools. They lean heavily on software dashboards and spreadsheets that track milestones but understand zero context.
So they see a box is checked, but not how it was checked.
Precisely. They use generic checklists from risk manuals. And yes, they rely on the opinions of the very same subcontractors they're supposed to be auditing and coordinating.
So when your job is to know a bid is unrealistic, or that a material sequence is physically impossible, and you're just relying on an alert from an app to tell you something's late,
You've transferred the ultimate decision-making power, which is judgment, away from the person legally responsible for the whole outcome.
the sharp critique here then is that this isn't management at all.
It's outsourcing judgment. You're doing the paperwork of project control, but you're not doing the actual intellectual labor required to drive a successful build.
Which brings us right to the mechanism that allows this to happen. The licensing paradox. The official legal gateway that grants all this authority. I really want to dive into what these GC licenses actually test for.
When you look at the curriculum for these exams, it's heavily weighted toward administration. They test business law, how to set up your company, manage complaints,
Contracts, I assume.
contracts, of course, how to file lanes, manage insurance liabilities, and they do test codes, but often it's the administrative codes like zoning or permitting processes, not the really high-risk structural details.
Okay, but then contrast that with what they don't test.
Right.
They aren't testing the practical stuff needed to actually build a quality building on time and on budget.
Things like realistic build sequencing, advanced trade coordination, sophisticated field problem solving.
Real cost realism, like knowing what a sub should actually charge for a job.
Yeah.
Quality control.
None of that is really there. We've effectively created an administrative filter, not a competency requirement. And the result is a system where legal authority gets granted without any demonstrable field competence.
And this is where the source material just had me doing a double take. The reveal of how these tests are administered, it's genuinely shocking. You're saying the general contractor exam is often entirely open book.
That's right, completely, 100% open book.
Wow.
I mean, think about that for a second. This is an exam that gives you the legal right to approve multi-million-dollar budgets, oversee structural integrity, and ensure public safety.
I can sort of see it for contracts and insurance, I guess. You look up a clause. But what is the implication when you apply that to, say, critical structural codes?
The implication is profound. The system is testing if you can look something up in a manual, not what you actually know or understand about the physical principles.
So you could walk into that exam, know the general layout of the reference book, and pass.
And you gain legal control over structural decisions, budgets, and timelines, just because you know the answer might be on page 407.
You don't have to demonstrate an understanding of load calculations or why proper shear wall nailing is critical or how to integrate a complex flashing detail, which are the points where buildings actually fail.
You just have to prove you can navigate an index.
So the conclusion from the source material is pretty damning.
It is. We have created a system that is not protection for the consumer or the public, it's theater. It's granting control based on an ability to reference, rather than an ability to execute or use experienced judgment.
Now, whenever this gets raised, the immediate defense pops up. It's the, well, construction changes constantly defense.
Right. You can't memorize everything.
You can't memorize every code, every new material. You have to be able to reference information, and that part is true.
It is absolutely true. But there is a massive gulf between having the skill to reference updated info and possessing the judgment to know when something just feels fundamentally wrong.
That judgment can't be open book.
It can't. It's intuitive. It's built only through years of watching things go right, and let's be honest, more often watching things fail.
A book is not going to tell you when a subcontractor is lying about a crucial step they finished. A reference manual can't predict when a specific architectural detail is going to lead to catastrophic water damage down the line.
And it certainly can't tell you when a seemingly small decision early on will snowball into a budget disaster 6 months later. That's all judgment. It's born from experience.
And this lack of required judgment, it opens up what the sources call the ChatGPT question, which I thought was brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
We now live in a world with instant access to Google, AI, real-time code lookups on our phones. So if the license exam is purely about looking things up and access to information is universal, what is the license actually protecting anymore?
If the barrier to entry is just having reference materials and knowing how to search, then the license isn't proving competence in the craft.
It's just proving compliance in the paperwork.
And compliance is, as the sources point out, it's essentially a liability filter. It's the paperwork that lets the transaction move forward. But compliance doesn't stop bad sequencing. It doesn't prevent poor coordination. It won't stop the field-level mistakes that destroy budgets.
Competence does that. The judgment from experience, that's what protects the project.
Exactly.
And that takes us to the inevitable and spicy truth about the real-world consequences. We've allowed the role of the general contractor to morph into a paperwork job that's still pretending to be a trade.
We've structurally traded craftsmanship for compliance.
Replace genuine experience with a credential.
And we've substituted true accountability with liability shifting.
And the results are, well, they're exactly what you see every day. Projects run late, budgets explode.
And the actual experienced tradespeople, the specialized electricians, the framers, they resent the management above them because they know the GC can't realistically check their work or understand their constraints.
And homeowners, investors, they lose faith because they're the ones bearing the financial risk of this broken system.
We do have to clarify, though. This system doesn't mean all GCs are unqualified.
Right. That's a key point. Many have years of hands-on experience.
But the structural flaw is that the system allows unqualified people to operate unchecked with vast legal authority. And in an industry responsible for physical safety and financial well-being, that allowance is just financially and structurally dangerous.
And when faced with all this complexity, the industry's go-to solution is more tech.
Get better software. Use this dashboard. Automate scheduling.
I thought that was interesting because technology seems like the obvious fix for a logistics problem.
It does, but only if the person using the tool understands the underlying process. Software tracks activity, it logs communication, but construction software cannot replace foresight.
It can't anticipate failure.
It doesn't understand context, and it cannot replace judgment. If the user doesn't know that an inspection requires 48 hours notice and that the trade must be off-site for the inspector, the software will happily schedule the next trade to start immediately.
So the technology is often designed to protect the companies from litigation.
Not protect the projects from mistakes. That's the key difference.
So what does a qualified GC look like for the future? Not some superhero who can do every trade, but the kind of manager who truly protects the project.
It's someone who has the experience to understand sequencing deeply. They know where risk hides. It's always in the complex details, the flashing, the load transfers.
They can smell a bad plan.
They can smell a bad plan, an unrealistic bid, a false timeline, because they know the practical limits of the field. They use software as a tool to organize complexity, but never as a crutch to replace their fundamental judgment.
This entire deep dive, it really boils down to one critical observation from the sources that just stuck with me.
Which one?
If knowing how to look something up is enough to be a general contractor, then experience is no longer required, only access.
And if the value proposition of the license is just access to information, and information access is now universal because of technology, the structure itself just becomes hollow and dangerous.
Construction slowly traded competence for convenience. It made compliance and paperwork the priority over actual expertise and judgment.
And until the industry demands better standards, standards that test practical judgment and proven field understanding, not just lookup ability, we're going to keep suffering the failures created by pretending paperwork equals expertise.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with today.
Considering how much we rely on their expertise, how many other crucial industries in your life, from finance to engineering, maybe even certain areas of medicine, have quietly adopted a system where legal authority is granted without demanding proven, experience-based competence?
Relying instead on just open book access to information. Think about that the next time you rely on an expert who only knows where to find the answer.